The United Nations got a fat lump of coal in its Christmas stocking this year, courtesy of the Trump administration. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley has announced a $285 million cut to the UN's budget for 2018. The US pays 22% of the UN's overall operating costs. Dr. Alan Mendoza is Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, a British think tank. Dr. Mendoza, how are these supposed cuts to America's UN largesse playing in London and elsewhere in Europe?
Well, not well. I think they've played about as well as the American decision to recognise Jerusalem as Israel's capital. This is not the most popular policy in Europe, but I've got to be honest, I think the Americans have done the right thing here. You're looking after your own financial responsibilities and you're making it clear that it won't be business as usual at the UN and things have to change.
Well, to go back to that Jerusalem vote that you just mentioned, isn't that actually part of the problem with the UN, that it's a very lavish body for striking attitudes? And that doesn't matter whether it's the Organization for Islamic Cooperation or the European Union. They all swan into the General Assembly and strike an attitude on Israel and then stick US taxpayers with the tab for it. I mean, is there any purpose to a body such as that?
Well, I think the General Assembly is just a waste of space. I mean, if you look at what you see there, you see democracies completely outnumbered by non-democracies, which wasn't, I think, the goal of the UN when it was set up. And as you say, you have every hobby horse being flogged. And the results are that frequently the democracies don't get their way in terms of what you might think would be sensible international policy, and you get crazy things passed through. Now, fortunately, of course, it has no sort of standing value. But then you've got a question, as you suggest, what's the point of an organisation, or at least a body, that has no ability to influence things and which gets hijacked in this way?
Meanwhile, back in the real world, the Islamic State has lost 98% of its territory. And yet that's barely made the papers because nobody wants to give Donald Trump the credit for it.
Well, I think this is the big story of 2017. It's been the defeat of the so-called everlasting caliphate. And indeed, Donald Trump and, of course, the American military must take a lot of responsibility and praise for this. But you're right, it doesn't come across in terms of public understanding, or certainly political elite understanding. But I think we will feel the impact of this going forwards in reduced terrorist attacks, of course, a reduced threat going forwards from radical Islam and other such matters. So, yes, I think the world does owe a great debt to Donald Trump and indeed to all those who have prosecuted this war to its ultimate end point.
What's your solution to the UN? Because it's basically the World War II victory parade. It's America, Britain, France, Russia, plus China. And if you want to reform anything, various of those parties object. Is it just something that should be left to die, every 200 million by 200 million cut? Or can it be reformed?
Well, I think you've hit upon something there, which is that the way to reform it is not to try and get consensus, because it's impossible. Which power, say, of those five alone will give up their veto power and look at that? Which group will want to sort of, succumb to less influence? It can't work that way. But I think the way's been shown, in a sense, by this budget cut. You've got the ability now to reform the step and say, we don't think this works. We're not funding it anymore. And if you don't fund it, then it won't go forwards in that way anymore. So the power is there. Do we have the confidence to use it?
That's always the question. They like their money. Dr. Mendoza, those UN diplomats.